Hi, and welcome to this edition of the Insurance Experts. It's my pleasure to have on the line Michael Boho. Michael, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, Mark. I'm glad to be here.
Okay, so I know you have expertise in a lot of areas of retirement planning and estate planning, but long-term care in particular, we share this mutual passion for. So how did you kind of develop that passion for long-term care?
I think growing up, I spent a lot of time with a lot of older people. And I just developed this like love for, people that were older than me and going through, difficult times. And, I just developed that big heart there. And because those people were important to me. In addition, working on the Medicare side for a lot of years, seeing the areas where we weren't really helping people and protecting those people was important to me to really focus in and try to find ways to help them.
Okay, and so after you began the Medicare planning side, I know you got into the long-term care business. Tell us a little bit about how that business began.
Yeah, that business began. I was working at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota, and one of the vice presidents that were designing their long-term care plan approached me, Frank, and said, we're not going to be selling this internally. Would you be open to starting up a company with me and building out, long-term care sales? I was fresh out of college, didn't have any bills, and said, yeah, let's do it. So we were excited. We went out and started a long-term care company that focused in just to sell long-term care to everybody.
Yeah, and then okay, fast forward today, right? You're later on in your career, and I know you work with a lot of advisors now. So tell us a little bit about kind of how your business looks today.
Yeah, today it's very different. Today I've got a lot of focus around life insurance, advanced planning, estate planning, disability, buy, sell, key man policies, all those types of things. But the one thing that stayed steady and the one thing that's really passionate, not just for me, but for all of our clients, is really that long-term care and the Medicare side.
Hmm.
It's one of those focuses that, I have so much passion around, and, shockingly, so do our clients because they've got stories to tell.
Interesting. And I know, we talk about that insurance has now evolved into more of a solution-oriented business instead of selling products. We're really offering different solutions. So
Yeah.
how does that conversation typically come up with the client?
Yeah, it's a conversation advisors don't like to have normally. So I come in and I just have it. And it's really as simple as asking them, hey, what has your experience been with long-term care? Have you had, family members or anybody else affected by that? And normally it's like you say that, and next thing you know, hold on for the next half hour, you're going to hear some really interesting stories that you've never heard from your client.
Yeah, it's like the floodgates open up when you start asking questions. It's a consultative approach, and it really becomes more of you're right, like a relationship building exercise more than, you're an insurance salesperson. You're really a consultant for them.
Yeah, yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, it's definitely a consultative approach because now you're sharing stories, you're sharing, worries into the future. And, if you try to sell something to somebody, that's a completely different approach. This isn't a car. This is
Mhm.
something important to their life.
Right. So, I want to talk about a story about opening the conversation, right? Because that's one of the biggest struggles we see out there is how does this conversation begin? Where do we begin? And I know that you had a story to share from your career. Tell us a little bit more about Phil and how you were in business with for the long-term care business with Phil.
Yeah. One of the businesses that we did a lot of work with was school districts. And so we teamed up with a company called National Benefits, a TSA company, because they did all the enrollment with us side by side. And since we were so edu- educationally focused, they were a wonderful asset because they did all the 401k or 403b stuff for the school districts. So they had a really good connection with their clients. Anyway, Bill and I grew a great friendship from that. And we worked together for many years. And we were out one night with his whole family, and he confided in me that he didn't have a long-term care policy, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. You need a long-term care policy. And he was like, really? And I said, you are so passionate when you talk to clients about that and offer it to them that you yourself need this to be better at being able to present this to clients. Because if you don't have it, why should they have it? And
Right.
so that night, he put together an application. We did a 10-pay type option, and it was in place. Well, years later, we kind of grew apart after that business, and I had moved on to other things, and he'd moved on, I think, to continue with his business in the TSA side. I received an email or a telephone call years later, and it was unfortunate because Bill had passed away,
Wow.
and they had their funeral up in Alexandria. So I drove all the way up because I had to go because he was such a great guy, and ran into some of his employees, his daughter, his wife, and so forth. And they were just like, we can't thank you enough for what you did by convincing Bill he needed long-term care, because for the last 6+ years he'd been diagnosed with Alzheimer's,
Oh my God.
and he needed full-time, round-the-clock care for all those years. And he had so much coverage, they didn't have to dip one dime into retirement and so forth. So Joyce was so thankful that they did that. She's retired now. She's enjoying life as they had planned.
Hmm.
And things may have been very different had they not made that purchase that night that we talked about that. And that's just something that, man, you feel so good about that you help somebody in that way or convince them.
Yeah.
And it's just something that sticks with me. And I, it's easy to forget about yourself sometimes when you're in this business and
Hmm.
trying to talk to people about it. You forget that you're a person too, and that these same things happen to you, and that you need to take care of yourself and your clients. And it'll actually make the conversation easier because now you own it.
Exactly. When people ask, advisors in particular, how do I open up the conversation? Well, the first thing to consider is what is your own plan? Because that is the first question you're going to get also from clients. And oftentimes they want to replicate what you're doing. Well, you must have chosen a good deal, so let's follow that. Like Bill, for example, did a 10 pay. Maybe he owns a business like a lot of advisors do, and there's a tax deduction available for them. All of a sudden, that also helps the conversation along.
Exactly. Then it's paid off. They don't have to think about it. They get into retirement and they're all set. They've got all those boxes checked, and that long-term care is a big one. So that's one of the biggest things people worry about as they get to that point.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing this story about how to open up the conversation. And I hope to have you on future episodes of the Insurance Experts. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, that'd be my pleasure. Thanks so much, Mark, for what you do.